What's up? I got a bone to pick with somebody, and that certain somebody is George Lucas. As you can see, this is another mini rant. This time it's on old Georgie Porgy, George Lucas. This is a rant that I've been wanting to do for years. I just never really gotten around to sitting on my behind and doing it. I think I might have done some things like this in like Talking Cinema, but not just a separate video about it. So this is basically the end-all be-all for me when it comes to Georgie Porgy. So George Lucas is a very, I would say, okay, I'm gonna say this right off the bat before I even get into the ranting. Do I appreciate what the man has done? Absolutely. His vision, no matter how flawed it really was from the beginning, his concept, his idea to bring Star Wars to the screen is why we have Star Wars. So I have to thank him for that. I do. Reluctantly, I have to be like, I have to at least do that. I can't be like, oh, he did nothing. No, he did something. He did a lot for Star Wars. But then again, he didn't do everything. Now, he might want you to think he did, but he did not do everything. No, he did not know the plots for 9 films from the very beginning. He could barely even put together a script that made any sense for the first film. And it took multiple rewrites in order to finally get something that was remotely filmable. I mean, from his first screenplay, it's not even Luke Skywalker, it's Starkiller. It was also like, I think it would, and Darth Vader looked completely different, and Han Solo was an alien. So there's a whole other slew of other problems. That could be a whole other video talking about the original screenplay of Star Wars. But this isn't about that. This is about George Lucas. And I gotta say, I thank him for his contributions to the franchise, absolutely. But I don't have to thank him for the prequels, and I sure as hell don't have to thank him for the special editions, or the constant edits he does to the original trilogy, or for how ungrateful he is when it comes to the original trilogy, the trilogy that made him who he is today. I've never seen a celebrity or a filmmaker be as ungrateful as he is when it comes to a series of films that made them who they are today. That's like if Steven Spielberg gave Jaws shit. Makes no sense. Even Steven Spielberg, as much of a schmuck as he is, he knows that that's stupid. He knows that that's not a good idea. But George Lucas consistently does it. He disrespects the fan base, and he cannot admit that he didn't do the right thing. He didn't do the right thing with special editions, and he didn't do the right thing with the prequels, and he cannot admit it. He can't admit any wrong whatsoever, except in a half-assed way. To recent interviews that, oh, don't, hey, some advice to the people who want to make a new Star Wars movie. It's not all about the spaceships, and it's not all about the, special effects. Oh, yeah, but since you don't insert your personal self and you insert I into that statement, it doesn't mean anything. It's not an admission of guilt. It's just saying, "Oh, by the way, Star Wars directors, don't do this." But it's not "don't do what I did." It's "don't do this." So it's a sly way for him to not even admit fault for the prequels or admit fault for his special editions or any of this. And he comes across as such a bitter, whiny asshole. I mean, in a recent interview, he starts off on this, oh, making Hollywood movies is not all it's cracked up to be. You know, it's you can't you cannot experiment with your films and how studios get involved and they won't let you complete your vision. And yeah, that does happen, but that there's a reason why that happens. There's a reason why studios get involved with directors' visions and don't let them experiment with millions of dollars. And that reason is Heaven's Gates. That's why why studios do not allow directors to do that anymore. Because you give them too much power and they do shit like Heaven's Gate, like what Michael Cimino did. Spend millions of dollars on waiting for the clouds to part so he could get the right shot. That's just insane. And first off, maybe the director's vision isn't that good in the first place. So, sometimes the studio has to come in and try to fix things. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And when it comes to Star Wars, George Lucas is not a good writer. He's not the greatest director in the world either. But he's definitely not a good writer. Even he admits he's not that great of a writer. He said that in interviews that he even admitted, I'm not that good at writing dialogue, which makes sense. Because that's why he hired Willard Hayek and Gloria Katz, who wrote the screenplay for Howard the Duck. He hired them to write 30% of the dialogue for Star Wars. Yep, for the first film in the franchise. 30% of the dialogue isn't even written by George Lucas. And that's a good amount of dialogue in a film that doesn't have that much dialogue. Star Wars isn't like loaded with dialogue. It's not like, oh, it doesn't have like tons of monologues and stuff. That's 30% is a pretty big number. And he proves he doesn't know how to write dialogue very well. Even his own cast members tell him so. Harrison Ford has admitted that he said to George Lucas multiple times, you can write this shit and you can put this stuff on paper all you want to, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to say it, and it doesn't mean that it's going to come across well. So it's pretty much, even Harrison Ford is like, what the hell are you thinking, George, with this dialogue? You can put this shit on paper, but it doesn't mean it's going to translate well, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to say it. How do you expect me to say this? This isn't how anybody talks. So there's a whole, for example, in Empire Strikes Back, when Khan, when Han is getting put into the carbonite, and Leia says, "I love you." The original story says, "I love you too," but even Harrison Ford's like, "There's no way that Han is gonna say that." So even Harrison Ford's like, "No, Han would say, I know," and that's all Harrison Ford. In fact, there was a lot of lines of dialogue that were changed up on set by the actors because George's screenplay was just full of bad dialogue. And so, and that's another thing that really upsets me when it comes to George Lucas, is the fact that he just seems to take too much credit for Star Wars, like everything. And I'm like, slow your roll, man. You're not responsible for the success of the entire franchise. Because you're not good enough of a writer or a storyteller in order for that to be the case. For Empire Strikes Back, he hired he hired a writer another writer who was this woman, and she had written a lot of other screenplays before, but sadly she passed away before she could really get the screenplay done. And so Leigh Brackett was her name. So you had Leigh Brackett wrote the screenplay, was the original choice to write the screenplay. George Lucas then, after she passed away, decided to do his own story treatment. Then he brought in Lawrence Kasdan. Lawrence Kasdan is really influential to the success of Empire Strikes Back and for the success of the franchise. Without Lawrence Kasdan coming in and doing a rewrite, the film wouldn't have, its story wouldn't be as professional and as really as well made and well done as it is. Because really, honestly, storytelling and dialogue and even screenwriting is not George Lucas's best. It's not his forte. I mean, have you seen THX 1138? I mean, America Graffiti was good, but they didn't really didn't really need a lot. It's a coming of age story. It didn't need like a ton of storylines. It wasn't epic. It didn't need anything like that. And anyway, George Lucas didn't even want to do Star Wars. He wanted to do Flash Gordon, I think, and he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers, so he ended up deciding to do his own film like those called Star Wars. So you have Lawrence Kasdan, who helped write the screenplay, did a great job, and then you have the film was directed by Irvin Kershner. George Lucas did not direct Empire Strikes Back, so he comes in and says crap like to fans' faces at Empire Strikes Back conventions. This is an actual occurrence where this is Empire Strikes Back get together with fans that George Lucas is attending, and a fan comes up and asks him, and pretty much says, what's going on with the special editions? Why aren't the original trilogies released on DVD? Basically, asking the questions, why are the original trilogies, you know, they're I can't even say it because it's so aggravating. Why aren't the original trilogies in their unedited format released on DVD and Blu Ray and remastered quality, not Laserdisc ports? And George responds with this: "Grow up, kid. These are my movies." Wow, what an asshole. These are my, grow up, kid. These are my movies. That's the thing I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to George Lucas taking way too much credit for the franchise. I'm sorry, Georgie Porgy. You weren't the only man. You weren't the lone man. You weren't the all alone on the totem pole by yourself creating this franchise. That's not what fucking happened, and you're delusional if you think that's the case. Now, you are the one that made it happen. You're the one that brought it to life. You're the one that it came out of your brain and you wanted to make the movie and you did the best you could to get it sold. But at the same time, you're not solely responsible for its success. Because without the efforts of Lawrence Kasdan or Irvin Kershner, especially Irvin Kershner, especially for The Empire Strikes Back, because he put in themes that were in the film that were not in the original screenplay, were not in the original story that George Lucas wrote, and he put them in the film because he felt they needed to be in the movie, and these were themes that were pretty dark, and these were themes that the studio didn't want in the film, and these were themes that George sure as hell didn't want in the movie, and Irvin Kershner fought for them. And the film is so much better because of that. In the third film, Return of the Jedi, George helped write the screenplay, but once again, Lawrence Kasdan helps with the screenplay again. So I don't really think George was responsible probably for the best parts of Return of the Jedi. Probably responsible for the Ewoks and the awful subplot where Luke and Leia, where Leia is Luke's sister, which comes out of nowhere and it makes no sense because it's not even alluded to in the first two films. So, and you know, there's a few other problems with Return of the Jedi, but you know, but it's still a good movie. It's still much better than Lucas's shitty prequels. And then you have Richard Marquand, who also directed Return of the Jedi, and both Richard Marquand and Irvin Kershner are no longer with us, so they can't stand up for themselves. They can't say that this is a bunch of bullshit. That no, George, you did not make Star Wars a successful trilogy. I'm sorry. And without their input, without their direction, especially Irvin Kershner, without Lawrence Kasdan's writing, none of we wouldn't be talking about how great this trilogy is. Because look what happened when George had full creative control and wrote and directed all three Star Wars films, the Star Wars prequels. That's all the proof you need that this man is delusional and he's nowhere near as talented of a writer or a director that he thinks he is. And it proves that there's without a doubt that he is not solely responsible for the original trilogy's success. And another thing, another factor that led to Star Wars to being successful, actually leading to its actual creation, is the work of Ralph Mcquarrie. And Ralph Mcquarrie is a concept artist, and George contacted him and got him to do concept art for Star Wars. The art was so visually stunning that Fox decided to give George Lucas and the production company money to make Star Wars because of Ralph Mcquarrie's concept art. It wasn't because of George Lucas's spectacular screenplay, because Fox had issues with it. They thought, you know, but they really liked the storyboards, they loved the concept art, and they really liked the ideas that the concept art showed. But you don't hear that. You don't hear Ralph Mcquarrie's name being mentioned when it comes to some of the most influential people when it comes to bringing Star Wars to life. No, you don't. It's George Lucas, and George Lucas, which is a bunch of bullshit because Ralph Mcquarrie is very important, is equally as important as George was to the sale of the film in the first place. Star Wars would have never have been made with the budget that it had. It would have never been released by 20th Century Fox. It might have been made on a super low budget on a Roger Corman production later, but it would never have been what it was if it wasn't for Ralph Mcquarrie and his concept art. He could have said no to George, and then George would have nothing, and Star Wars would just be fan fiction. Pretty much. It would be original stories in his head that he wrote down on a piece of paper that would never get published. Maybe get published in a book, but never would be a movie. And that's the thing. George is, he knows how, I think he has a good vision. I think he's a good visionary, but he's not good when it comes to getting it on paper. So he's a good visionary, but he's not a good storyteller. And that's the thing. You can be visual all you want to. You can have the most imaginative mind on the planet, but if you can't put that on paper and do it well, then it's kind of hard to really any of these imaginative story ideas to really live, or for them to become films, let alone novels, because they're not polished enough. And that's kind of how it is with George Lucas. I honestly think the first Star Wars film, his first few screenplays for the first film, were a lot of it was fan fiction. It's just glorified fan fiction. But George Lucas, the prequels were definitely fan fiction. No, don't tell me he had those ideas before. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. This is a man who said certain things and then said this stuff afterwards. He's so full of shit. It's unreal. And so, yeah, I just had to bring that up, that he is not the man responsible for the for the trilogy success, or for Star Wars. He's not solely responsible for Star Wars. He's also a man who had no faith in the franchise. He had no faith in Star Wars. He had none. Because after he finished shooting the film, he immediately went, I think, to Hawaii or someplace as far away as possible from the premiere or from opening weekend to hang out with his friend Steven Spielberg. And he was so confident the film was going to be a flop that he agreed to let Spielberg have a cut of the film's profits. The rest is history. The film was a huge hit. Spielberg still gets profits to this day from Star Wars. And all because George Lucas was so confident the film would be a flop that he let Spielberg have a cut of the profits. I know people bring in, well, if he was so confident it was going to be a flop, why would he buy the merchandising rights? Because they were dirt cheap, and he thought they'd earn him a little bit of some extra cash. Any filmmaker in that situation would do that. Doesn't mean that he knew that it was going to be a success. He just bought the merchandising rights because they were dirt cheap. So this is a man who, in essence, lucked into a multi-billion-dollar franchise. A franchise that he had an idea of a film he wanted to make, and he wanted to make it, but at the same time, he had no faith in it. Because if he did, he wouldn't have made the deal with Spielberg, and he wouldn't have given up on the film before it was even released. That's telling to me. I don't know about you, but I think that's really telling. If he really had so much faith in the franchise, if he was really so big on Star Wars, he would have never given it up on the franchise in the first place before the first film was released. But of course, once the film was a hit, then he's all Star Wars. After it makes billions of dollars for him, then it's his franchise. Then they're his movies. And they're not just his movies. They're Richard Marquand's movies, Irvin Kershner's movies, the Lawrence Kasdan's movies. They're the Cast and Crew's movies, the Ralph Mcquarrie's films. It's not just his films. So, those issues aside, okay, all right. You know, those are some reasons. Those are some big reasons why I have issues with George Lucas. Now we get into other problems. Okay, namely the special editions, which I saw the Empire Strikes Back special edition in theaters when it came out, and even then I was like, what the hell is up with the CGI? George Lucas decided, instead of remastering the original trilogy and in its unedited format, he decided he was going to fuck with it and add unnecessary stupid CGI sequences and stupid shit into the films because he wanted to. And the audience's reaction was not very enthusiastic about it, and so he's bitter about that. He's pissed. He's upset. He's being, and he's just completely and utterly pissed off at the fan base for not accepting his shitty special editions. I'm sorry, George. They suck. And I don't appreciate you, a guy who, ironically enough, said in multiple interviews before this, films should be preserved. We should not let films be destroyed. And here you go, saying things like, if I could burn all the copies of the originals, I would. Or permanently altering copies of the full print, permanently altering some of the few prints that exist of the original trilogy of Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, permanently altering them and throwing in the special edition changes. These are permanent alterations, folks, that are permanently altered. These are things that completely fucking marred the print. They're permanently altered. It cannot be undone. So this is a guy we should preserve film history, and I'm going to permanently alter the few prints that survive of the original trilogy. Nice one, George. Fantastic. Good one. And then, now, if that wasn't bad enough, of course, and he even says stuff in other interviews that, well, years from now, the only versions of the trilogy people remember are the special editions. But what the fuck, George? No! No! Yeah, people remember the special editions, but they don't remember them fondly. They don't remember that CGI abomination fondly. No, they don't. Or that bullshit where you made Greedo shot first or shot at the same time that Han did. No, people don't remember that shit fondly. By the way, Han shot first. None of this bullshit the special editions have. People still remember the original trilogy and its unedited format. And that's the version of the trilogy that they like. That's the version of the trilogy that they love. That's the version of the trilogy that made you the billionaire that you are today. And you are just sitting there and being the most disrespectful, stuck-up fucking douchebag as you possibly can when it comes to the films that made you who you are today. It is just so insulting to me to see a man who has made this much fucking money to just sit on his ass and badmouth the very films that made all of this fucking money that he's swimming in possible. Damn right it pisses me off. Because that's being completely ungrateful. That's being disrespectful. That's not respecting what got you to this situation, to this unbelievable amount of money in the first place. It seems like every chance he has, he just wants to shit on them. Shit on them with the special editions. Say shit like if he could, he'd burn them all. be pissed at people for not liking his shitty special editions, edit the original trilogies again on Blu Ray, and still have the same special editions but not the original unedited versions on Blu Ray and remastered HD quality. Nope! It takes Star Wars fans to do that unofficially with the despecialized editions. But no, instead George adds even more fucking stupid changes and fucks up with the originals even more with the most recent Blu-ray release. With stupid shit like Vader and Return of the Jedi, instead of just standing there and not saying anything while Luke is being finger electrocuted, he's going, no, no! Like, why? Why, George? That didn't work out in the prequel in episode 3 where Vader's like, Padme, no! That was one of the worst scenes I'd ever seen in the history of Star Wars. And you fucking put that shit, you did that shit again, and you put it into Return of the Jedi! And you did stupid, useless, unnecessary changes, like in Star Wars, where R2-D2 is hiding behind some rock face. He adds more rocks, which then makes it completely impossible for R2-D2 to have even fit into that hiding place in the first place, because there's too many rocks in the way, so there's like a fucking space that's this big. Unless R2-D2 can shrink like Ant-Man, there's no fucking way he's getting into that spot to hide. Or when you have Obi-Wan Kenobi scaring off the Tusken Raider making a noise, sounded fine in the original film. No, instead he changes it so it sounds like what would happen if you recorded Ric Flair getting electrocuted in the balls. So he's like, oh, whoa! It was just fucking embarrassing. It's stupid. There's many other changes that were just completely unnecessary. Now, some of the changes that him and Lucasfilm made to the original trilogies, like taking out the strings and remastering some of the special effects, that's not a bad thing. That's fine. But throwing in this CGI shit, like a stupid scene in the first film, when Luke and Obi-Wan and C-3PO, they're going to try to find Han, and you're just driving on a land speeder, and then here comes a fucking shitty ass CGI fucking creature that looks like shit, walk in front of the fucking screen. What the hell? What is that? What the fuck is that shit? There's a reason why people remember the original trilogies more than the special editions, George. Because those are actually good. Fuck's sake. They're classics. They're considered some of the best films in the science fiction genre. And you want to be like, no, they're not. My special editions are the best. No, they're not. You delusional fuckwad. Then you have the prequels, which, do I have to say very much else about the prequels? George Lucas hadn't directed in years, hadn't written a film in years, and then he does episode 1, and it fucking shows, because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I mean, even back in the days of Return of the Jedi, I mean, he didn't know what he was doing. His first choice for director for Return of the Jedi was David Lynch. Guy who directed Eraserhead. And then after David Lynch said no, he's like, well, how about David Cronenberg? What the fuck, George? You are out of your mind. They're two great directors, but they are not suited for Star Wars. And then I gotta bring this up too. I mean, I enjoy Howard the Duck, but after watching it again, it's bad. There's some really bad things about that film. Only George would fight hard for a movie about a talking duck from outer space to get made. Think about it, folks. This is a movie that George Lucas made possible. Only for the mind of George was that gonna happen. I'm glad it did, but at the same time, it's like it kind of proves my point. This guy is not some amazing filmmaker. He's not some excellent writer. He's not even the greatest producer. I mean, people bring up the Indiana Jones films. I highly doubt he was responsible for those films' success, at least the first 3. I highly doubt it. It's the other screenwriters and it's Steven Spielberg. It's more Steven Spielberg's baby and more the other writers' baby than it is George Lucas. George Lucas just got on for the ride with Steven Spielberg. There's a lot of ways. That's kind of why he was still relevant for so many years after Return of the Jedi. It's because he was friends with Steven Spielberg, who was the biggest director on the planet. And if it wasn't for Star Wars and its success, which he had no faith in, he would be stuck directing experimental, boring movies nobody would remember, or directing American Graffiti 2. He'd be directing direct-to-video movies, and maybe he might still be producing with Steven Spielberg, but that's only because they're best friends, and that's the only reason why he'd still have a career. So anyway, back to the prequels. George is the one that thought Jar Jar Binks was a good idea. He thought it was something people would like. He didn't do it to spite us. He didn't do it to piss off Star Wars fans. He did it because he genuinely thought that people would like Jar Jar Binks, and he thought the kids would like the character. That's why he did it. Do I need to say anything else? He had an opportunity to cast an actor, a kid actor who could actually act to play Anakin, and had opportunities to do that because the auditions are on the DVD, the special edition DVD episode 1, and he chooses, no, I'm not going to go with the kid actor who can actually act. I'm going to go with Jamie Yippee Lloyd for some reason, because he really loved him in Jingle All the Way. And in that special edition, there's a making of documentary that's so great to watch, because you can see a lot of these like these guys who are working on the film, editor, special effects guys, and they're even talking to George. George is talking about his ideas for episode 1. He's talking about, and even there, you could see in their eyes and in their mannerisms that they are in their head. They're thinking a lot. Thoughts that are probably like this: "Oh my God, what the fuck, George? Seriously? No, George, this isn't going to work." But they don't have any balls, so they decide to just be a bunch of yes men, so they don't say anything. So, of course, George gets what George wants, and we get a piece of shit. The same thing happens in episode 2. We could cast somebody other than Hayden Christensen as adult Anakin, but we don't do it. And just, how about say no to the screenplay where the stupid line were like, "Oh, our love is like coarse grains of sand," or that stupid shit. Nope. George gets the final say. And since George is not that great of a writer, you get shitty dialogue like that. And going back to George as being a bad writer, when he was writing the Star Wars, at least the first draft, he wrote the first draft, had no input, the draft was a complete mess, was way too long, and made barely any sense. Second draft only started to make more sense because his wife was there while he was writing and telling him, "Nope, that's not going to work, George. That's not going to work, George. Nope, George." And she was the only one that he was going to listen to. Because for some reason he wouldn't listen to other people who read his other screenplay and were like, "This sucks. You need to fix this, this, and this, and this, and that, and take out that, and flesh this out." But no, he didn't, because I directed American Graffiti and THX 1138. What do you know? So, yes, you have the prequels. George wrote and directed them. They sucked. I don't think he's solely responsible for Star Wars or for the success of the original trilogy. Not at all. Then, of course, now we get to The Force Awakens, which I admit I'm actually looking forward to it because recent trailers have actually made me curious about the film. But George Lucas is interviewed about it recently, and he says, like I said, that's what I was saying earlier. He half-assedly says the thing where he says, like, "Don't make it all about spaceships and special effects." But hey, I don't say don't be like me. I just say don't do it. Don't do that. And then when they ask him, like, "What character would you like to be from the franchise?" He's sheepishly, with a smirk on his face, "Jar Jar Binks." You fucking asshole. You fat fuck. You're not funny. Sorry, George. And then him whining and bitching and moaning about, how making movies, not how much, it's cracked up to be. George, you would have avoided all of this drama, all of this hate, and all of this if you would have just gotten off your high horse or taken your head out of your fat ass and just released the original films in their unedited format, remastered, on DVD and Blu Ray. That's it. That's all you had to fucking do, and you would have millions of Star Wars fans bowing down to you. Nope. Can't do that. Can't put your ego aside to do that. And even though Disney has the rights, I highly doubt we'll ever get them anyway, because there's some way George will get in there and throw his weight around, because he owns almost half the company in stock. George Lucas, you might think, okay, he sold Lucasfilm to Disney, but he owns a lot of Disney stock now. So he has a lot more say and pull when it comes to what Disney wants to do with Star Wars than you might think. But that's something that just gets thrown under the rug. Because, he's not involved creatively, but that doesn't mean he can't still be involved. Because when you have that much stock in a company, you're pretty much almost co-owner of that company. Think about it. There's a lot of say and a lot of pull when it comes to being in that position. That's why I hope Force Awakens is great. I hope it's fantastic. And I hope the other Star Wars films are great too. But I'm kind of afraid though, because Disney is going to milk this cow until the cow dies. And then they're going to try to keep they'll try to find a way to bring it back to life, or clone it and milk it again. Because that's what's going to happen with Star Wars when it comes to Disney. They're just going to keep milking the cow, and I don't know if that's a good thing. You might have some good Star Wars films at the start, but then the quality is going to start to diminish because it's just becoming a cash grab. But yeah, I really don't know what else to say about George Lucas. I really don't. It's just too bad. It really is. Like, it seems like even in his old age, he can't be humble. He can't just admit his mistakes and when it comes to this franchise and how he's treated this fan base. Nope. Still has to be as smarmy and as whiny and as bitchy and as moany and as ungrateful as possible. So yes, I appreciate the things that he did for this franchise and did for other franchises. But he's not the sole man responsible for their success. In fact, he should be thanking people like Lawrence Kasdan and Irvin Kershner, Richard Marquand, his wife, people on the set, cast and crew members, ILM. He should be thanking Ralph Mcquarrie. He should be thanking those people for Star Wars being successful. Shouldn't be patting himself on the back for every single fucking thing Star Wars related. I'm sorry, George. You weren't the reason why. You weren't the sole reason why everything was successful. It was a team effort. To hear you say shit like, these are my movies, kid, it's just insulting. It's insulting to Richard Marquand. It's an insult to Irvin Kershner. It's insulting to everyone else who was involved with the series and put their hard-earned time and work into it. I mean, come on, man. Why do you have to be such a colossal douchebag? But that's who Georgie Porgy is. Him and Steven Spielberg and Schmuck make a perfect couple. No wonder they're friends. They're both schmucks from different mothers. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say except fuck George Lucas. Especially George Lucas now. This is a man who said some pretty good things back when he was a young filmmaker, but for some reason has become such a bitter, old, and ungrateful asshole in his old age. And I don't put stock in anything he says anymore. And I don't respect the man. And I don't have to. If he doesn't respect me, why the fuck should I respect him? Anyway, thank you for watching my rant on George Lucas. And I will see you guys later. See ya.